Welcome back to Take a Leap and Transform, a Neurodiversity journey. I'm your host, Joseph K. Muscat. Are you ready to take a leap with me? As we embark on this journey, let me introduce myself as Malta's Neurodiversity consultant, Joseph K. Muscat. I've been a pioneering in neurodiversity awareness within Malta businesses landscape for the past 3 years. During this time, I've engaged in speaking, coaching, and conducting workshops with companies and organizations like Betson, Benna, and FHRD. This year marks the introduction of Neurodiversity Week to Malta, where we present insights from incredible guests about neurodiversity in the workplace. Now let's leap into our interview. Welcome to our first day and interview of Neurodiversity Week. When talking about businesses and the inclusion as well as support of neurodivergent talent, the key factor that may always come into play is leadership. The most important kind of leadership is at board level. Without their guidance, which encompasses the entire organization's inclusion, will always face barriers. So how do we get leadership from the top to understand neurodiversity is good for business? And that understanding how people, and in particular neurodivergent employees, think differently is a valuable investment for any type of business. To embark on this conversation, I'm pleased to be joined by FHRD board member Noel Debono. Mr. Noel Debono is an FHRD board member and human resource capital consulting manager with over 16 years of experience in HR across diverse industries, specializing in management, leadership, HR, operations, learning and development, and workflow planning. Welcome, Noel.
Hi, Joseph. Welcome. Thank you very much for this opportunity, and thanks for inviting the Foundation for Human Resources Development for your first talk on Neurodiversity Week. We're very privileged to be here as well.
Well, thank you for joining us and for participating and adding your valuable insight on this topic. So, Noel, when we examine organization structures, we recognize that culture is shaped from the top, influenced by a company's set values and public perceptions. So why are business leaders at the board level hesitant to embrace neurodivergent buy-in?
Okay. So I think from an HR perspective, we have natural tendency to go with what we think is a normal way of thinking. And this is a single way, and that there is a single way of thinking. So very often we tend to be more open to engage with employees who are thinking on the same level that we do, basically. And that is very often where employment happens. So when it comes to employment, for a very long time, a lot of organizations were basically employing people who have the same mindset, to put it in a way. So so when it comes to board level, I think there are three main challenges that one needs to keep into consideration from an HR perspective. First and foremost, there is a lack of awareness. So I would say, in generally speaking, there is a lack of awareness, but especially at board level. And very often you will find that board members are not familiar with the concept of neurodiversity and or the implications for their organization. Nowadays, we know that with a lot of companies struggle to find not just the right resources, but the correct number of resources. And very often is because we tend to stick to what used to work in the past, on the type of people that we used to employ in the past. So very often we find that issue. So that is the first point. So lack of awareness. Also, the second point is that board members normally tend to think mostly about the well-being of the business rather than of its people. So they might be hesitant to invest in initiatives that could bring neurodiverse people more on board within their organizations. board members per se normally are more interested, and C-suite in general are more interested in the profits of the organization, because that is what keeps the business going and growing basically. And the third point is predominantly related to stigma. So there is a kind of a negative stereotype which is associated with the concept of neurodiversity. And obviously that makes it difficult for any HR professional who wants to invest and who wants to get the backing of the board to invest in related initiatives to get people on board. So I think these are the three main aspects that nowadays, when you're trying to invest in an initiative that could bring more neurodiverse people on board within the organization, and later on I will be explaining why it is important and what are the benefits for the organization, bringing on board more neurodiverse people. I think these three issues, so lack of awareness, more focused on the profit side, and the element of stigma related to neurodiversity, could hold the conversation with the board level back, or keep it at a very conservative level without reaching any backing and any support from the top.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And excuse me, these are three very interesting points. I mean, yes, obviously, lack of awareness, more education would definitely change perceptions and hopefully initiate the compass of moving into a new direction rather than the way currently things are. And yes, the current situation that we do face is that people are used to what they know. And so that's why we tend to have more homogeneous teams. And the way the system is designed for more homogeneous teams rather than people who are on the outskirts and not knowing how to adapt to them. The profit side, I always find this interesting though, is that no one's saying that a business can't make profit and that that profit's not important. But it's the people that within the organization that makes it capable for an organization to make profit. So you need to create that culture of inclusion and support for the individuals in the organization. So that way they become more productive and hopefully, and as a result, you see an improvement of profit. So I've always find it, interesting from the mindset of employers where they're not seeing that perspective and understanding and how that actually has an impact on their profit. And then, of course, lastly, the stigma. The stigma is also, how can I put this? Somewhat challenging in the sense of, I guess the only word I can say is a bit of hypocrisy. And the reason why I say this is because a lot of employers, 1/3 of entrepreneurs or board members are neurodivergent. We know the numbers, we know the stats, and they've faced that stigma going up into the organization and don't want to tell others because they're afraid that if a fellow board member or another business partner knows of their neurodivergency, there's going to be stigma put upon them. And yet they're not willing to come out and be open about their neurodiversity to make it easier for those who they employ to be able to come out, to lead by that example. You see what I'm saying?
Exactly. Yes, in fact, I did a few research on the topic before this conversation, and obviously there are quite a good number, for example, of famous people who are neurodivergent. I picked on two. One is Ingvar Kamprad, which is the founder of IKEA, and from a business point, from a Hollywood style, there is Emma Watson also, which is a famous actor, and she's also a neurodivergent person, which is quite open about this. Now these are just two, and there are the more famous ones as well. So I think what's happening here, because we're seeing that a good number of business owners are actually neurodivergent, which is quite a good percentage of the business, the entrepreneurial side. And I think that is the result of not fitting within the normal business context. So
Right.
they understand that they need to move away from the normal employee-employer relationship and maybe build something for themselves, and that is what makes them successful. So in that sense, at least, there was there is a benefit, because these people, if they found a more comfortable employment market for them, most probably they would have never thought of their businesses or their talents, to be honest. But yes, I think very often they decide to move out from the norm, from that stereotype of employee-employee relationship. Because as I mentioned before, we have a tendency to employ what we call the mini-me.
Mm.
So from an employment point of view, at interview stage, when you come across someone whose looks resembles, or even from a characteristic, from a behavioral point of view, resembles pretty much similar to the interviewing panel, very often, and they get a good chance of getting hired for the job,
Right.
because since I believe that I'm good, if someone ticks all the boxes that I tick, most probably that person is good as well. So in that sense. Now, I think the biggest mistake from an employment point of view, because we've been complaining that very often we're not finding talent, not finding the right talent, and we're not finding the right enough numbers. Very often, it's not just about skills, but also about numbers. And correct me if I'm wrong, Joseph, because I've been following you these past weeks in your interactions on other media channels as well. But there is a big population. I mean, the estimates that I got is around 30% of the population. Is
It's you're I would say you're right, and I would say it's more than that.
Okay.
Globally, the estimate is about 20% of the population.
Okay.
Now, that's taking into account a rough estimate of what we know and what we speculate. But then we also have to take into account that there is the undiagnosed. Now, is the
Exactly.
undiagnosed another 10%, or is it another 20%, or is it more?
Exactly. Exactly. So what we're saying here is that around 30% of the potential talent pool is not being tapped, basically, when it comes to employment. And when I say it's not being tapped, because we're used to the normal traditional way of looking at jobs and employing people and filling the vacancies as well. So when it comes to that, when you have a neurodivergent person who's trying to apply for a job, and they're lacking the personalized support, and they're looking at the organization and they're seeing that there is no mention about neurodivergency and the concept, and very often is people either don't apply, or because they say most probably will not get the job, or else they would apply, but very often, because of the current systems that we utilize when it comes to employment, the current processes and procedures are not in line with picking up neurodivergent people as well.
That's 100% correct. And later on this afternoon, we'll be meeting with Mark Crowley, who's a neurodiversity specialist for recruitment. And we'll be covering more detail about that. But just to go on to what you've talked about, there's a number of things in that regards. I mean, we're looking at the job description. Many neurodivergents who are qualified will disqualify themselves based on how the job description is written. There's also the interview process, and how the interview process is frankly an unstructured interview process and not taking into account neurodivergents who are applying. So there are a number of caveats to tackle in that aspect. And that in that aspect, we have to look at what we can change internally as well as externally to be more attractive to neurodivergents. I'm thinking about a seminar where I was one of the keynote speakers at last year, hosted by Betson, where one of the speakers had presented the demographic changes of employment. And because there's a huge talent shortage, now employers rightly and wrongly, I guess you can say, just the way the
Mhm.
circumstances are the demographics and circumstances are going, is that there's a lack of talent pool of
Mhm.
based on again based on the homogeneous perspective. So now because there's a lack of talent and skills, they're now opening the doors to perspectives they haven't seen before. So you're seeing neurodivergency, you're seeing people with physical disabilities who are now having more opportunities. You're also seeing again an older generation, which we've been seeing that trend for quite some
Exactly.
time now. We're now
Mhm.
extending the retirement age from point X to point B now because, we need, more talent and there isn't enough money in the public social
Mhm.
security to pay for all these retired people. So you're seeing all those
Exactly.
kind of dynamics. With all of that said, when we examine the values and mission statements and the existing misconceptions or a lack of awareness regarding the benefits of neurodivergent talent that needs to be addressed at board level, how can we go about proactively addressing these issues and potentially addressing the resistance that's coming from board level?
Mhm. Mhm. Um, yes, what you mentioned, Joseph, is pretty spot on. In fact, especially when it comes to the aging population. We're facing a situation of age where we have an aging population, and within the next few years, we'll be seeing a surge of employees who stay beyond retirement age. Now, that is also an investment that the organization needs to make as well, because obviously their requirements and their needs are different. But they can actually, as you mentioned, the organization can leverage on their knowledge to teach and mentor and coach the younger generation that they're working in, and they're trying to build um, uh, their skills within the organization as well. So that is just one factor.
Hmm.
But going back to the neurodivergent and the neurodiversity topic, um, when it comes to board member, I think very often it depends also HR where they stand at board level. So I think this is a very important starting point because we need to understand where HR sits. Does HR in the organization sits at board level, or maybe HR is just another function or hidden away within another function of the organization further down the structure. Obviously, the more you are at the top, the better, and it's more easier for a human resources professional to um, push the message for a neurodiverse workforce. Um, if you're further down, obviously you need to struggle more, and you need to build a much stronger case. So I think it depends pretty much to start with. It depends from where we're starting. So what is our starting point? But in any case, I think there are a number of strategies that one can adopt, irrespective from where they're starting, and make sure that the organization starts looking at the option of having a more neurodiverse workforce, basically. I think the difference between from where you're starting is how much you need to amplify. Okay,
Hmm.
so if you're at the same level, at board level, you don't need to amplify a lot, but if you're further down, you need to amplify because your voice needs to be heard further on, basically. So what strategies one can adopt? I think the first and most important one is to educate board members. As I said, I believe most board members have no idea about neurodivergent. And we, as HR professionals, we are the ones who should push for that message. Because first and foremost, we are the ones who are struggling with finding the right resources. And when we communicate with the board and address the board very often, introducing the concept of neurodiversity is an opportunity to try and address the issue of not finding enough employees, basically. However, we need to understand, and the board needs to understand, and explaining what neurodiversity is, what the impact it will have on the workplace as well, and what are the benefits also of supporting, because there are a number of benefits when we're supporting neurodivergent employees. So I would highly encourage HR professionals to find the time whenever they have the opportunity to present to the board or to organize a workshop and make sure that the message is passed through. There are also a number of opportunities with new companies embracing neurodiversity. There are a few. I would say that typically the big companies, the global ones, are the ones who are very often at the forefront of such initiatives. But there are a few. I managed to find a few from, for example, there is SAP, there is Microsoft, and there is JP Morgan as well from the financial services industry, when they have actual programs in place to try and attract neurodivergent employees and also to retain them in the workforce. So there are a number of interesting case studies that one can also share with the board to help them explain the concept and see that this concept actually works. So there will not be the guinea pigs as an organization to implement such an initiative, but this has been in other organization, this has been implemented and with a very good success rate as well. So education, and also obviously we need to highlight with a business case. Rightly so, obviously the board, when HR professionals tend to present something that sometimes we miss because we focus just on the people aspect, which is good. But obviously we need to present a business case for that. And that includes obviously what are the benefits. And the benefits are increased innovation when it comes to neurodiversity, potential increase in productivity, and also an increase in employee engagement. Those are the three aspects, the three benefits that investing in neurodiverse employees can yield for the organization. I'll be explaining these further on, but yes, definitely with innovation, productivity, and employee engagement, those three aspects can present a very strong case for developing a neurodiverse strategy for the organization. As I mentioned, also showcasing success stories will help, because that would give the safety net for the board to rest their mind that this is a strategy. This strategy has been implemented elsewhere, and the success rate was high. So that would help also to share positive outcomes that were achieved as well.
Thank you, Noel. So there's a couple of things here that really got my attention. And this is an interesting conversation, and it's not the first time I've heard this discussion in regards to HR at board level. Generally HR ideally is supposed to be the bridge between employer and employees. Unfortunately, that's not always the case, depending on the organization, where HR may swing more one way or the other. And of course, both sides will see them as HR against them rather than for them, or building that bridge. With that said, what can be done then to have more HR at the board level to try to mitigate this situation?
It's not an easy task if it's not at board level already, because I think a lot of organizations have an HR person at board level through a maturity process. So it depends pretty much on the organization at what level it is. And the Malta, especially, I think, since there are a very strong presence of very small companies, sometimes they're also family owned, getting at least also the HR element within the organization, anywhere within the organization, is already would be already a big achievement. So it depends pretty much on the level of maturity that the organization is currently at. So you would most probably, generally speaking, you would find more the presence of HR at board level in large organizations or organizations that have been matured over a number of years and they are quite in a stable aspect. And that happened because very often, at one point, the organization understands that without people, even in the era of artificial intelligence and technology, without people, most probably the business cannot operate. So there will come a time where they will understand that, and in particular situations that will come across, and they will understand that, listen, we need to make sure that our people are adequately catered for, and that is where the profile of the HR goes up and up to board level.
Well, this is
So,
interesting. Sorry, go ahead.
so I think from a strategic point of view, if the HR function is not yet there, I think it needs to present itself in a way that in a proactive manner. I believe that being proactive from an HR perspective, analyzing the market, anticipating future needs, being innovative, not just sticking to one way of doing things, will help also to show that yes, there is the need for having HR at the decision table, basically.
Well, it's interesting because you answered my question, what I was about to ask, because I see, you mentioned bigger companies, right?
Mhm.
And what I see during my consultancy and meeting with companies, particularly in Malta, where, I mean, globally, we see that there's a large percentage of micro to SMEs
Yes.
in numbers in comparison to larger companies.
Mhm.
So I see that there's a greater need of the awareness in smaller companies than more so in larger companies. But the argument I always get is that we're too small. We don't have the resources as larger companies. And you've kind of answered the question in the sense of that HR needs to present himself in a way that will bring that value to these perhaps family-owned companies for them to realize it's worthwhile to make the investment at board level and company whole towards neurodivergent talent.
Mhm. Definitely. Um, I think when it comes to any type of organization, normally, when you have let's put everything into context. I think one of the biggest issue, and so there are two big issues when it comes to employees and organizations. The first one is the one that we already mentioned, that organizations are struggling to find talent, the right talent. The other big issue is that you have people who are leaving the organization as well.
Mm.
And they're going elsewhere to find and to seek opportunities which they believe is better than what they have at the moment. So you have two elements there.
And if
Now,
I may,
mhm,
just quickly to know
mhm.
is that many of them are leaving not just because of pay; they're leaving for better organizations that will support them.
Exactly,
And
exactly,
that needs to
exactly.
be highlighted because many organizations are thinking that they're leaving because of the pay.
No, 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 definitely not, definitely not. I think the pay is, we have to keep everything in context. I think nowadays the financial aspect hasn't gone back. So there was a time where people were leaving for pay way back because companies were more or less the same. So working for company B is more or less the same culture. One pays more than the other, so we shift. But I think these last 15, 20 years, people were moving away and moving to other organizations primarily because of growth and growth opportunities and for purpose as well. So the element of financial financials was not that important again. Although recently we've seen a slight surge back into the aspect of financials, also because cost of living as well is having its impact as well. So getting an extra income is also helpful. But definitely yes. I mean, statistics show that the main reason that employees leave is because of their manager. That is the main biggest reason why employees leave, because of the culture that the manager or the head of function instills within that particular function, and because there is no chemistry at the end of the day with the manager. The second reason why is because of peers, basically, why people leave. So these are the two main aspects. So it's related to people. Now, when you don't have an HR function, or the HR function is purely administrative, so paperwork, primarily handling paperwork, the managers very often are left on their own. So first and foremost, typically and historically, organizations promote the people who are very good at business, not necessarily at handling people. So if you have a sales-oriented organization, normally the best salespeople get promoted into a managerial role. If you are working in an organization where there is a big emphasis on business generation, those employees that manage to generate a lot of business are those who get promoted. So they're promoted on their technical merits very often. But then they need to manage people, and very often now, before if I am promoted to managerial role, into a headship role, I need to find and allocate the time then to handle people. And without the support of HR, because HR is non-existent in certain organizations, then it's just a question of let's try this and let's try that, or maybe completely put aside all the notions of people management and employee well-being. And that is where you have an issue, and you have a recipe for disaster from an employee point of view and from a retention point of view. So the importance of HR is to make sure that the people who are managing and who are supposed to lead their respective function, they do that within the business context, but also making sure that the employees who are working in that organization, that part of that function, they are being treated well, and they enjoy themselves coming to work so much that they are fully engaged with the organization. That is, in my opinion, the major role of the HR function. So when there is an HR function which is relatively small and it's trying to put itself at board level on the decision table, it's very important to show what is the return on investing in HR. Because very often it's missed. I mean, the return very often when it comes to HR is pretty much, sometimes it's difficult to quantify. So, and as a result, a lot of organizations think that HR is very often a cost, ends up being a cost or being considered as a cost. When in actual fact, there is a lot of investment going on, which, if done well, the return can be seen. But obviously, it takes time. So when one needs to start small, build the strategy bit by bit, and prove itself one at a time that certain concepts are working, rather than change a lot of things at one go.
Right. So what you're saying then is, from what you're saying in my perspective, is just as much as we need a business case for neurodivergent inclusion, HR needs to create a business case towards board level of why HR is such an important role, and what are the aspects and implementations that they could be deploying to help the business even more so through that business case.
Yes, exactly.
And going back a little bit earlier, you mentioned about managers. One of the things, and one of the things I offer is management training towards neurodiversity. Is there's an interesting study coming from 2017, 2018 in North America, highlighting exactly what you said. Managers in a North American perspective, in Canada, in Malta, it will be, I find the age is younger, but usually the standard age that someone gets promoted towards a manager is around 30, 35 years old.
Yeah.
And again, as you pointed out, they're highlighted because they have technical expertise, they have project management skills, and then the people skills kind of gets left to the side, or the attitude is that you learn as you go. And they
Exactly.
don't actually get management training until about 4 to 5 years later after their promotion. So the curve is more is learning as you go, trial and error. And again, this going back to what
Exactly.
you said earlier, where managers are left on their own, without having a proper support from HR. And what the study has found out is that managers, and particularly line managers, are crying for more training because they realize they need this training, particularly as the work dynamics has greatly changed, being toward employee focused.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
and then you also have to add on the caveat on top of that is, yes, they need more training, and now they also need to have neurodiversity training because now we're opening the doors to who they're ready employing and who they're leaving at the door.
Exactly. Exactly. Joseph, I think this is pretty much this makes me think about the aspect of hybrid and remote working.
Mm,
So most organizations introduce hybrid and remote working because out of necessity, because of COVID primarily.
mm,
And that is where a lot of employees discovered, well, that they can actually work either hybrid or remotely, and they can still be productive. Now, I know that there's a lot of debate going on about this topic. There are people who are pro complete hybrid and remote, and others who are not so sure. But very often, there again, a lot of organizations, so because out of necessity, we've put everyone working hybrid and remotely, managers were not trained to handle hybrid and remote working. And this is because a lot of organizations thought, okay, physically they're not here, but it's the same job, they're doing the same thing. So instead of physical, they can do it remotely without any issues. But when you try to manage people remotely, it's a completely different ballgame. We know that. Especially when you have people, for example, who have issues. And because very often face to face, you can realize if someone has issues, whereas from a remote perspective, it's difficult. But a lot of organizations thought, okay, let's put everything, and we've seen this also from a training perspective, because we used to get calls as well to deliver training sessions. I remember once I was asked to deliver a training session, and they said, okay, we're planning to do it face to face, 6 hours, and we can do it 6 hours remotely. Same thing, right? It doesn't make any difference instead of. And I said, no, no, this is completely different. Remote is completely different, even from a trainer point of view. The way you prepare for a remote training session is completely different from a classroom-based session. And I remember these people were looking at me saying, no, no, what's he's talking about? But nowadays we realize that it's different. So what happened very often, what happened after COVID is that a lot of managers, because they were not trained to handle remote and hybrid employees, they were going to top management asking for their employees to return back to work. And the biggest pressure was being done by actually line managers to ensure that their employees get back to work because they couldn't handle it anymore, and they had no idea what was going on, and they were not given any training. And as a result, a lot of organizations nowadays, they reverted back to mostly asking their employees to work, if not all the week, a good number of days every week back at the office. And everyone seems to be happy. So this concept of is very similar to what neurodiversity and trying to put neurodiversity at the workplace. Because if there is no training and there is no support, okay, if I'm putting neurodiverse people in certain functions, and I'm not training the manager, and I'm not hand-holding the manager to be more supportive and be supportive in a different way, then obviously that project, there's a good tendency that's going to fail because the manager will struggle. The manager will say, okay, I have other things to do. I cannot keep focusing on just my neurodiverse employees. I need to make sure that all employees are are being taken care of, and very often you lose their support. So it's very important that whenever we're implementing, and that is why it's very important to start small, even when introducing neurodiversity in the organization, you need to start small. Make sure that you have a number of achievable goals. I would recommend that you start with one particular function, one particular role, and I know that there are organizations that actually work in that within that dimension, and demonstrate basically. You're kind of doing a pilot project, and you're demonstrating that this can work. And if it works, then we can scale it up and make sure that eventually we can have something which is across the organization. Then it's fine, because even from an HR perspective, and even from a board level, and even from a managerial level, there is a learning curve as well, and that learning curve needs to be taken on board.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and what's your interesting what you suggesting, starting small is technically an accommodation for neurodivergence, where you take a task and you break it down into chunks and you focus on one chunk, and you can't move on to the second chunk until you get the first chunk done, right? Because
Exactly.
you need to work it out, make sure it gets done properly, because you're overwhelming the system, or you're overwhelming the person.
Mhm. Yes, 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 yes.
And just very quickly in regards to remote working, I mean, the neurodivergent community, particularly the ADHD and the autistic community, have been for decades been asking, calling out for remote working, because of it's much easier and much better for them to work based on how
Mhm.
they think and operate. But they always got denied until COVID happened. And then COVID, and
Exactly.
then it just flipped the narrative. And
Mhm.
with that said, I'm going to kind of segue a little bit, because I agree with everything that you've said, and definitely more training. But I want to segue, but it's very relatable to what we're talking about and how we can get board level on this. Last week, and I'm going to throw you a bit of a curve here, Noel.
Mhm.
Uh, and, and we're going to get a little bit political here. But last week, an article came out in the Times Malta in regards to the UPE union taking a job action in regards to LSEs,
Okay.
and not covering them, or having them not cover for someone who's sick, because there's over 180 students waiting for LSEs.
Mhm.
Now, I'm not going to get into the politics of that, but
Mhm.
what is interesting out of that is that during the same time, within the 24 hours of that article coming out, in the same time frame, an index report, which is the second one of its kind, came from City and Giles in the UK, which is a world global index report in relationship to neurodiversity. And a lot
Okay.
of things that they highlighted uh, in the article is very relatable to what the report had found out, and what and even ADHD Malta is calling out for, because we're looking at parents who have to take time off work to come
Mhm.
support their child because their child's not able to go to school because there's no LSE.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
let's now the second report comes from City and Giles. It's when they did the first report last year, they found that particularly parents were finding it difficult without having flexible work to support their neurodivergent children. And of course, they themselves may be neurodivergent.
Exactly.
So, and what they realized was there was very little to no, actually, pretty much non-existent studies in this area. So, on the
Mhm.
second year, they tend to focus more on this area. So, let me just give you some stats here. Coming from the City Giles report, 30% of neurodivergent parents reported that navigating the education system impacted their employment, often leading to reduced hours or leaving their jobs. This is particularly impactful if the parent is also neurodivergent. That's coming from the 22 report. So when we come to the 23 report, 39% of working parents have neurodivergent child. 36% of working parents say that the neurodivergent child impacts their work. 28% of businesses reported not having any accommodations for parents, caregivers, or neurodivergent children. 33% of businesses say that they have upcoming plans to implement such a strategy. So we can see there's a huge disparity in supporting neurodivergent parents or parents of neurodivergent children, where flexible working is one of the potential solutions. So when we take a look very quickly at the solutions now, and then I'll ask you your thoughts. The solutions is offer flexible working arrangements to support and retain talent, create and support employee resource groups, include board members who are parents of neurodivergent children, provide training for line managers or better communication and people-centric management, stuff that we've kind of already covered, and establishing internal workplace support programs such as medical insurance, employee assistance programs, and educational funds. So with all of that said, now let's put this into a Maltese perspective in relationship to Maltese companies. What can we do to get board level support and programs in place to support neurodivergent parents and employees who have neurodivergent children?
I think this is very interesting because now we're talking about the parents who are supporting their children. So instead of supporting directly the neurodivergent community, is just supporting the persons who are supporting the neurodivergent community. I think that is why a lot of people are asking for flexibility even at interview stage. So this is the most common question. Normally at the end of an interview, we tend to leave the floor for any questions that the candidate might have. And I would say more than half of potential candidates, potential employees ask the same question: whether the organization has flexibility, has flexible work arrangements, hybrid, remote in certain instances, fully remote, etc., etc. These are the type of questions that they're asking, and very often the type of these questions are asked because there is a need, not just for the fun of working from home, because very often for a parent, working from home means additional costs. Imagine working during the summertime from home. Very often you need to switch your own AC on and use your own electricity, whereas you can work from the office. So it's not a question of savings or money related or just for the fun, but very often there's a particular need, and that gives them the flexibility to support their family members when the need arises. I mean, these are the needs also for people who don't have neurodiversity children or family members as well, let alone people who require it more. So I think that is the most important thing. There are a lot of statistics showing that when you offer a hybrid opportunity to employees, you have a greater chance that they stay with you. So the engagement levels go up, and productivity very often goes up as well. I have discussions almost every day with employees and with colleagues where they all say the same thing. When you need to focus on something, the best place to do the job done, because let's remember that most of our offices are all open plan offices, so you get a lot of distractions as well when you're working from the office, is when they work from home. So I think those organizations who are giving the opportunity for their employees to work and to work from home as well and to be hybrid whenever they need. You don't need to have a lot of conditions or whatever. Whenever it is required, I think, because I think a lot of employees, it's an element of trust then with your employees. If you trust your employees, you don't need to say, okay, you need to work 2 days from the office. You need to work 1 day from the office. You need to work 4 days from the office. I don't think organizations need to go that far. I think organizations need to allow their employees at the end of the day to decide when it's best for them to work from home and to be more supportive to their children or whatever is the case. So yes, definitely. I think whoever is shying away from offering these opportunities, I think they're finding a less open market for employment.
Yeah, and it's interesting as well is that, you know, hybrid working, for example, 2 days in the office, 3 days at home. Well,
Mhm.
we're trying that system and we're finding out that that is actually not as flexible as it
No,
needs to be, right? So
exactly.
we need to really examine and understand what flexible working means, and particularly what it means to that individual and why
Exactly.
they're asking for that and how we can appropriately accommodate that. And
Mhm.
again, as you pointed out, is realizing the overall benefits that's happening and coming from
Mhm.
that. And and going back just quickly back to the managers is, we see that, when managers who have difficulty in managing remote working, they tend to over micromanage, and that
Mhm.
causes a lot of stress towards the employee because they're always,
Exactly.
looking over the shoulder or having to have their camera on or getting constantly messaged if they're working or what have you because they didn't respond to a message, in 30 seconds. So
Exactly.
it causes this huge stress where, again, the training needs to come into play. And from a neurodivergent perspective, they've set up their home environment to be more inclusive to them, to
Mhm.
their needs versus a work environment, as you mentioned, in versus an open space plan, let's say.
Exactly.
So with all of that said, no, and I just want to be
Mhm.
conscious of the time that we have left. Um, one of the strategies that is being employed to support neurodivergent talents is ERGs, employee resource groups or focus groups within
Yeah.
organizations.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
when we take a look at on an international basis with ERGs, particularly in the North American perspective, they tend to get funding from the board level. And they do
Okay.
make a business case for the existence of an ERG. Uh, and the ERG is not only used as a safe haven for neurodivergent employees to communicate and support one another, but it's also used by the board to help initiate and change the culture or incorporate the culture towards more inclusivity to neurodiversity and having more strategies in place, and ERG helps implement these strategies. So
Mhm.
coming back to the board level discussion, how can we get board levels and companies to better incorporate
Mhm.
ERGs as a useful tool towards this initiative?
Exactly. Good point. Um, I so first and foremost, I think with any job, um, you need to have a certain skill set. So I think there are jobs which are more predominant and more adaptable than others. Okay, this is like me. I cannot apply for any job in the world because I'm not good at everything. So there are skills which I don't have, skills I don't possess, or skills that I'm not interested in. So it depends on the aspect. So when it comes to implementing or having a neurodiverse strategy, one needs first and foremost to understand which are the jobs that would fit in best within within a neurodiverse community, basically. So that is the first important thing. I think also as a selling point for the business, now that we have ESG in place and we're pushing for a lot of organizations to become ESG compliant, um, is I know that it is a shallow thought, but at the same time, if you want to get buy-in from the at board level, it resonates a lot with the board members that they've been listening about ESG and having diversity at the workplace because diversity is one of the drivers of ESG, and at least in implementing a neurodiverse community in their workforce, at least they're ticking that box when it comes to ESG. So although as shallow as it may seem, obviously it's a benefit and it's something that it's good to make aware the board. Um, then there are a number of certain aspects that one needs to keep in mind. So, for example, you mentioned technology, the use of technology. It's been proven, and there are a lot of statistics to show that the neurodiverse community very often is pretty much inclined towards the use of technology, and they are very they tend to be analytic and they use technology quite exhaustively. So when you have aspects in related to technology, skills like, for example, pattern recognition, and information processing, those type of jobs would fit in better within that could be promoted as part of this initiative as well. Other aspects are, for example, problem solving. So when you have roles that require an element of problem solving. So that's put together within a strategy, within a process. So you're trying to engage with the neurodiverse community and trying to get employees who are neurodiverse within the organization. That helps a lot to create an environment that you're kind of matching their skills with the requirements of the business. The results, the benefits are multiple. So first and foremost, you have a lot of, when it comes to talent retention, you're improving your talent retention. And we've seen from what's been going on with what we call the Great Resignations, that nowadays employers are more aware about the importance of having staff loyalty as well. So neurodiverse communities statistically have shown when they're put into places that is adequate for them, they're utilizing their skills, and they're in an environment where they are being taken care of, and they tend to be more loyal, and they become comfortable and get familiarity as well also within the organization. And the end result is that they're less likely to hop between jobs. So that gives a sense of relief, let's say, to the organization that the investment that is being done is being repaid with loyalty and better retention levels within the organization. There are also some statistics showing, and I've seen a few, when it comes to productivity as well, that when you have neurodivergent professionals who are being put within roles that they fit within their skills and they're being supported, adequately supported, statistics are showing that they're being more productive in doing that role. So there's an increase in efficiency also, and that results also in revenues as well for the organizations as well. So that is helping as well. And when you're trying to come up with a strategy within the organization to include neurodiverse employees in your organization, showing them that there's an increased revenue, reduced retention rates, and more loyalty, that will help definitely to get the backing of the board and the C-suite.
Fantastic. So what you're talking about is being more strength focused and knowing how to support those challenges, but scale those strengths, which is a topic that I quite often talk about as well. So from board level, from HR, from a company as a whole, then, how can we get the company managers to focus more on strengths and to know where to place employees appropriately to both the employee and towards the organization's advantage?
Yeah. So we need to start with a lot of organizations, they have their own job descriptions. So their roles are based on job descriptions, and we need to understand, and I think that is a very good starting point from where to start. Understanding the job description, understanding whether it fits, and someone who's neurodiverse can actually do the job and can actually do the job well. And I've seen that some organizations actually, they put it explicitly in the job description to try and attract neurodiverse candidates. They've put it explicitly in the job description or in the job advert. So saying, listen, this is a job which could be ideal for someone who's neurodiverse. Or we're actually looking at people who are neurodiverse. There might be jobs that might be, for example, deemed as, I don't know, repetitive, for example, where someone with a who's neurodiverse might find it more engaging, for example. So in that case, they would be more interested in applying, for example, for that kind of role. So putting that in the job description, for example, and saying, listen, this role would be a good fit. Now, obviously, you need to have the experts with you. So people who work in the business, and obviously need to gain the support to understand whether certain jobs, and obviously understand that there are a number of NGOs, for example, locally, where I'm pretty sure that they're willing to help, and consultants also in these areas that are willing to help and obviously to support the organization. Say, listen, let's sit together. Let's see what are the areas where we can actually start investing in, and focus on that area. And eventually then obviously have a full program where one can support managers to make sure that the employees they're getting all the attention and all the necessary support that they require, basically.
Yeah, I think the program is very crucial here. I agree with everything you said here. We just have to be careful that it doesn't become a checkbox approach, because you could put in
No,
we're inclusive, but then the interview process is not an inclusive process that supports that
exactly.
candidate,
Yeah.
then that's automatically red flags to the candidate, and they know
Mhm.
that it's not a good place to be for them. And then also comes the aspect of, if they get through the interview process and get hired, but then they are in a team with a manager or employees, or in their work environment department is not supportive, then
Exactly.
again, we've done the front end, but we haven't done the back end, and
Exactly.
it creates an unsavory situation for both the employee and the organization.
Exactly. Exactly. And that is why we need to start small. So start with one function, with a few rows, see what could be a good win for the organization, for the employer, and also for potentially a potential employee as well, and make sure that you have enough time to support the whole process. And as you said, it's just a question of making sure that sometimes we need to adjust and making things slightly different than we're what used to make sure that we're attracting the right type of candidates, basically, and be supportive throughout the whole journey.
Mm.
And that is a learning curve, as I explained earlier. It is a learning curve for everyone, HR included. So through that process, the first one, most probably there will be a lot of learning outcomes, things that one would need to take on board and adjust the process accordingly. And then once we're satisfied that we have a very strong process in place, that we're attracting the right talent and we're seeing also the returns, that is when you try then to actually scale up eventually. So we need to start small, definitely.
Start small, make those micro adjustments, do trial and error, figure out what's working, focus on what's
Exactly.
working, and don't focus on what's not working. Um,
Exactly.
Comes from a solution focused practices.
Mhm,
So,
mhm,
so just to sum up our conversation, because we're we're
mhm.
we're we're at the end of our time. Um, we need to educate. Board members need to become educated.
Definitely.
We need to have HR at board level, and HR needs to present themselves um, as that bridge in value. We need business cases for both inclusion of neurodivergent, and a business case for HR to get that on board supporting. We need
Mhm,
management training. They're
mhm,
they're asking for it, they want it, so we need to give adequate management training on how to support neurodivergent employees, and frankly all employees, because then we get into the avenue of universal design principles.
mhm.
And then lastly, we need to ensure that we are knowing we're strength focused on talent, and placing that talent appropriately and supporting that talent. And that often starts off with a really proper uh, good recruitment process.
Exactly.
And
Exactly. I
fantastic,
agree.
Noel.
So
So
these are all aspects that one needs to keep in mind. They sound a lot, but the mindset is that whenever you're implementing it, this doesn't apply just for this topic, but it applies for anything when you're implementing something new within the organization. Um, Initially, there's a lot of hand-holding and understanding where we're fitting and making the right adjustments as you go on. It's like you have someone who's learning how to swim. You don't just throw them in the deep end in the pool and then you hope that they float. You handhold them, very often you keep them, you make them feel that they're secure, and then slowly a bit at a time, as at the same time they're building their confidence, and then you let go slowly, 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 and that is the process. So as long as HR professionals remember this concept, then obviously anything that they want to implement, and this would be neurodiversity at the organization is one of them, they can adopt the same concept and make sure that they go slowly but surely, and eventually grow and let go when they feel that they're confident enough to let go.
And once again, it comes back to this is a perfect analogy to what you said earlier. Start small, and then
Exactly.
work it until you get it right. And and choosing out of those topics or those closing topics that I pointed out, which one you're going to start small with, and then building from there.
Also, I think you need to find support from the organization. So if you know about employees, for example, that they have neurodivergent children, for example, or they're neurodivergent themselves, for example, you might have managers like that as well. They would be more receptive to this case. So they would be more willing to help. So apart from starting small, choosing your best allies when you're starting small, there's a better chance of making a success out of it.
Yeah, and that's where starting the communication, communicate and breathe in your organization that you are open to neurodiversity and inclusion, making it safe for people to have these conversations. And then from there, consider and look into employing or integrating ERGs, where there's an employee resource group where these individuals can get together to get the support, and then the organization can use them to implement some of these initiatives.
Exactly.
Well, no, you have endured quite a gracefully and with success during your time here. I genuinely appreciate the insights and knowledge you've shared, particularly in the crucial topic of getting leadership from the top on board in supporting neurodivergent individuals within organizations. Today, my audience, we've had an amazing opener to Neurodiversity Week Malta, and it's not over yet. Be sure to join me at 4 p.m. as I'm joined by Mark Crowley, the founder and director of Diversita, a recruitment agency that focuses on neurodivergent talent. Together, we will discuss effective neurodivergent recruitment practices. Till next time, take a leap and transform.